So, Project Black Flag. In my original impressions video of Kobold Press's new system, I was pretty optimistic, as I often am about these things. Like many people, I was really rooting for this system and had high hopes for its future. But since recording that first video, we've gotten a few things. Celeste Konowich's Design Diary number 1, an update to the Project Black Flag FAQ, and I've gotten the chance to actually playtest this material for myself. And to be honest, the more that I learn about the vision and design goals of Project Black Flag, the less excited I get about it, which is the opposite of what should be happening. Also, like I said in that first impressions video, for me, I find it really hard to talk about Project Black Flag without also talking about 1D&D and the Kyle Brink interviews. In fact, since then, the Dungeons & Dragons YouTube channel released a series of interviews between Todd Kenrick and Jeremy Crawford, explaining the future of 1D&D, how they look at playtest feedback, and we've gotten the fourth part of the 1D&D playtest, Druids and Paladins. Suffice it to say, we have a lot to talk about today. Hi, I'm John from Incendium RPGs, and today we're talking about my thoughts about the future of Project Black Flag. Let's get into it. Time for the subscriber roll-off. I'm going to roll a contested persuasion check. If my die meets or beats yours, then I've persuaded you to subscribe to our channel. And if I get a critical success, whatever that means depending on what system you like, I've also convinced you to hit that notification bell. All right, here we go. All right. Looks like we're not getting a lot of subscribers with this one. In fact, we may lose some. So when I originally did the first video on my impressions of Project Black Flag, it was outside of the context of a lot of information we have available to us now. A lot of my thoughts have shifted, although a few of them have stayed the same. So let's actually start with the latter. In my initial impressions video, I said that I liked how a lot of the concepts were presented and organized, such as the order of the steps when it comes to character creation, beginning with a character concept and then immediately choosing a class because it's going to be the most mechanically significant choice. And I liked how clear the gaining levels section was between the two primary ways most groups track leveling, XP and milestones, and how the definition of the term milestones matched how the community understands them. From the eyes of a new player, these were all things I appreciated. And although it's arguably not a new idea, I did like the presentation of lineages and heritages in that they could be mixed and matched around to create unique characters, or iconic archetypal characters if that's what you want. I stand by all of those things that I liked about the system. Now, having actually sat down with some players and talked through the character creation process, in the words of Jeremy Crawford, I found some things illuminating. Alright, so determining ability scores. To determine your starting ability scores, roll 7 4d6s, add up the highest 3, discarding the low die, to get your total, then write it down. Originally, I thought I knew what they were going for. Like I mentioned in my impressions video, there's this common house rule that I've seen at honestly most tables that I play at when you roll for stats, where instead of generating 6 totals to be your ability scores, instead you roll 7 scores and then drop the lowest. This method I think is colloquially known as 46 drop the lowest, 7 times drop the lowest. And really what it does is if you get a super unlucky score, it's gonna mitigate it a little bit. Although what I found is in general what it does is create a slightly more powerful array than if you were to do the original method. And with that in mind, the very first section of Project Black Flag's playtest packet mentions that Black Flag characters are intended to be a little bit more powerful than normal 5e characters. So that's why I thought they were going with the 7 4d6 method. But upon reading it again, and reading it a little more closely, first, that's written kind of confusingly. Like, they use the number 7 and then spell out the word 4. And 7 and 4, there's no space in between. But then if you read the next sentence, do this 5 more times until you have 6 totals between 3 and 1, which seems to indicate you are supposed to roll 6 total ability scores, in which case that 7 comes off as a typo instead of a house rule. And now I'm just confused. And this is not the first typo that they've made that has yet to be corrected or clarified. I mean, in Design Diary 1 at the bottom, at least at the time of this recording, Celeste Konowich, who is credited as a senior game designer is spelled wrong. Next, as pointed out by Treant Monk, in the hand-to-hand talent it says, you are proficient with unarmed strikes. Well, yeah, every character in 5e is automatically proficient in unarmed strikes, so this talent really doesn't do anything. And unfortunately, it kind of betrays the fact that maybe whoever designed this feat doesn't have a super strong grasp of the mechanics as is, or at least wasn't very thorough when it came to understanding the unarmed strike rules that are already in play. And one last example, in my impressions video, I made mention about Combat Caster in particular, that maybe rather than just giving flat advantage to concentration checks, the whole if the check is less than your spell save DC, you succeed automatically, may end up being easier to adjudicate in play, and might actually just be differently balanced. Differently is a word. It is really overpowered from people who have done the math that are much smarter than me. After listening to a lot of mechanics analysis, I am hard-pressed to disagree with their assessment that this material is severely imbalanced. Overall, after having some conversations with TTRPG friends in my circle, and after having seen the material played out for myself, both in actual gameplay and through a discussion around character creation, my concern is that although lineage and heritage is a neat idea, the options aren't unique enough that I find them compelling. If I had the choice between 5th edition's core rulebook and these rules, in good faith, I couldn't recommend picking up Project Black Flag. And yes, I understand it's a playtest, they're trying to generate feedback. But I can't help but notice, just even looking at the backgrounds and the talent system, I'm getting the same feel as 1D&D, as if this system is just a clone. More on that later. So when playtesting characters built using this system, using monsters that I picked out of the SRD, a lot of the abilities were so situational that we didn't actually get to see them in play, and very little new content was able to be shown. Some other people have commented on the fact that, well, maybe as the DM I didn't set up scenarios where those more situational features were appropriate. But again, I can't talk about Black Flag without talking about 1D&D. When 1D&D came out with their character creation UA, which was the first packet we got, as a DM running a very generic playtest scenario, we actually got to see a lot of features come into play. The dwarf's new tremor sensibility was used almost immediately. Ardling, which is now confirmed to be out of the playtest, we got to see how that trait that gave Ardlings a healing word could be used with a half-caster to great effect. One of my players was an Ardling Ranger, and that Ranger was one of the most fluid and versatile characters I had ever seen. And that was something we could establish right from level 1, and it didn't take me engineering any scenarios to see its value. Now that being said, in my initial impressions video, when I just saw the packet, outside of the context of understanding their design goals or their vision, I could offer it a fair amount of forgiveness. After all, this system was announced in the midst of the OGL debacle, with the clear goal of offering an open system alternative to 5th edition, since there was a fear that the original OGL 1.0a would be deauthorized. Originally, what my feedback would have been is, this is a nice try, here are some adjustments to make, let's try again soon. And then we got Design Diary number 1. Look, I'm sure Celeste Conowitch is a lovely person. A lot of the content creators that are openly forgiving Kobold Press for having a misfire on their first try comment on the fact that they know the Kobold Press team in person and they're really awesome people. And I'm sure that this team is creating the system with the best of intentions. And one thing I feel I have to make clear is I don't want to come off as an apologist for Wizards of the Coast. What I will say is that I did and do still support the D&D design team. Because remember, the source of this OGL debacle was more in the legal and business departments, and it has come out that the D&D design team was highly against the deauthorization of OGL 1.0a. And I find that, to put it nicely, a lot of the statements in Design Diary 1 lack grace. I'm gonna be burned at the stake for this. All right, let's get through this together, team. To quote Design Diary 1, "In the hustle and bustle of an exciting new project, we have heard that you want to know the point of it all. Why make a 5e clone? Why not tear up all the previous 5e projects and start from scratch? Why?" Okay, it's one thing for me, a third-party speculator and content creator, to casually say that Project Black Flag is a 5e clone. It's one thing for the community to use 5e clone as a shorthand term to simplify and conceptualize what Black Flag is probably going to look like. In my opinion, it's another thing to embrace and champion that outright, especially when originally we were told that Black Flag was going to be a completely new system. At this time, I'm not disappointed so much in that Black Flag is a 5e clone and that they pivoted, as much as we were told it was going to be an original system. Then, without any communication beforehand, the playtest packet came out with material that basically said, just use the rules of the SRD, but with these slight tweaks. And then you release a design diary that felt like it was almost bragging that it was a 5e clone because they know 5e better than the designers. And for the amount of times I saw sentimental statements throughout Kobold Press's websites about the value of community and standing together, I feel like it was a wrong move to release the playtest packet without any heads up first. And really all they had to do was say, originally we were going to do a new system. That was before 5.1 was released to Creative Commons. Now that we have access to 5e, we want to see if we can improve on the framework so that we can make the best game system possible. That's all they had to do. Lack of communication and mismatched expectations. Sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? All right, next section. I can't believe I'm going to read this whole thing. It's time for the monopoly on D&D to end. This is a wildly exciting time to make TTRPGs as we stare down the possibility of an RPG future not ruled by one master game under the control of one master company. Alright, all over the internet, I keep seeing the use of this word monopoly. Let's look up what that word means. The exclusive possession or control of the supply of or trade in a commodity or service. Hasn't one of the big things these past few weeks been to try other game systems? Wouldn't that then imply that the commodity of TTRPGs is not in exclusive control of Wizards of the Coast? The term monopoly is getting thrown around a little too freely for my tastes, and again, to be honest, it's starting to just feel like a hollow exaggeration. Now, is Wizards of the Coast the largest creator in the 5e space? Yes. Do they have exclusive possession of the entire industry? No, or we wouldn't have other game systems to try to begin with. Was there the potential threat of them ending trade on their system? Yes, and that would have been extremely damaging to the industry. And should that possibility have come to fruition, then maybe I would have given this monopoly comment a little bit more credibility. One of our wise team members said something that I think about almost daily. This game has meant too much to us for too long to let it remain owned by just one company. but it's not. That's what the whole Creative Commons thing was about. Again, feel free to be skeptical about Wizards of the Coast's future moves, but in terms of the SRD and its use in game design, it's not really like owned by the company anymore. It's in the hands of creators as freely as it reasonably can be. And you even get to pick your license depending on what's going to serve your needs better. One of my close friends put it like this: "This sounds like everybody's anger died down when 5.1 was released into Creative Commons, and these statements are intended to rile everybody back up." Now, everyone, including myself, was pretty excited when Project Black Flag was like the call for the rebels to fight the Empire. But now the Empire surrendered and gave us more than we asked for. And after reading this, I can't help but shake the feeling that in order for this project to be successful in the way they wanted it, they were counting on Wizards of the Coast to continue making bad moves. So while I think that Project Black Flag is still going to be worth covering and following, I just can't help but shake the feeling that to outright embrace the fact that you're making a 5e clone, it just comes off as insecure. Like, you don't trust your own design instincts to create a somewhat original system that can be backwards compatible with the products that you already created to have like a Kobold Press internal ecosystem without having to keep comparing yourself to Wizards of the Coast and 1D&D. Reading through this a few times, I think the intention was for it to come off as power to the people, but to me, when I read it, it comes off as rebels with a made-up cause. But let's continue. "We want 5.5e, not 1D&D. 5e rocks, it's the best edition of the game ever made. Though, as with any game, there is room for improvements." Where have I heard this before? 5e has been going for a long time in the life cycle of RPGs, and it's time to make some corrections, but I don't want to toss the baby out with the bathwater. I don't feel great about what I have seen and speculated about 1D&D thus far. I seriously doubt that 1D&D can fulfill the promise of true backward compatibility. Hey, I get it. Kobold Press has a catalog of dedicated 5e products. It makes sense that they would want those products to remain relevant, even future-proofing it by creating their own 5th edition custom system. I mean, don't want to toss out the baby with the bathwater. Now the next part is where she loses me. To repeat myself, I don't feel great about what I have seen and speculated about 1D&D thus far. I seriously doubt that 1D&D can fulfill the promise of true backward compatibility. Say what you want about 1D&D's balance and design, although I don't think criticizing a competitor just to push your own product, which has already disappointed the majority of us, is necessarily a mature approach. And let's take a moment to discuss backward compatibility. Really, what does that mean? From my understanding, Kobold Press defines it on the first page of their playtest packet. Player characters created using the core fantasy system are slightly more powerful than characters created using 5th edition. But they are close enough that a 5e fighter and a core fantasy system fighter could still play together at the same table. So yes, their hope is that even though there are some slight power discrepancies, two characters created using these two different systems could play at the same table. But can they really? To go back to my own experiences actually playtesting this content, the options were wildly out of balance. Some options were ridiculously underpowered, some options were ridiculously overpowered. In my opinion, if you're gonna make a statement like, "I seriously doubt that 1D&D can fulfill its promise of true backward compatibility, and that's the reason why you don't like 1D&D's material," and you're going to claim that you're going to live up to those mystic words of true backward compatibility, then maybe your material should live up to that promise. Which again, look at some of the top rules analyzers for this system. Now, if instead the article said something like this: 1D&D is taking the game in a direction that doesn't fit our particular tastes. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna try our hand at designing the 5.5e that we would like to see. Would you like to go on this journey with us and help us shape the future of the game we all love? Man, isn't that inspirational? But it doesn't. Reading further down, and again, this is language that bothers me, it becomes apparent that one of the design goals of Project Black Flag is to take material that's printed in the player's handbook and not in the SRD, kinda change it a little, and then print it under the core fantasy system and release it into Creative Commons. On the one hand, I'd be curious about their design if they hadn't demonstrated that they were just going to do it badly. The talents that were in this playtest, where you could clearly see the comparison between the PHB feats and these new talents, they weren't favorable alternatives for game health. And the line, "Do you want to just play a champion fighter until the end of time? Neither do we." Who wants to tell them we've been playing subclasses other than champion for like a while? To me, these statements indicate that the why behind this system's design is out of step of what we as consumers were asking for. The OGL drama wasn't about the fact that there was some material in the PHB that wasn't in the SRD. It had to do with third-party creators feeling safe adding content to the game that they loved. Not this taking down the man and plundering the loot that is their IP. Would getting PHB content released into Creative Commons along with the SRD be cool? Sure. But does WotC have the right to protect their IP that wasn't included in the original OGL 1.0A? Absolutely they do. Hey, is the steak built yet? The mob is ready with their torches. So obviously, I only took some excerpts from Celeste Konowich's Design Diary 1 to demonstrate the point that I have. I implore you, read the full material for yourself. Form your own opinions, even if they're counter to mine. I just think it's really foolish to just dismiss 1D&D's design, especially since the team creating it supported our fight to maintain the authorization of OGL 1.0A. Is it justified to distrust Wizards of the Coast right now? For sure. But like I mentioned in the original Impressions video, if 1D&D is backwards compatible with 5e, and if Project Black Flag is backward compatible with 5e, it means that potentially those systems are going to be compatible with each other. When originally reading Project Black Flag's playtest packet, I was excited by the possibility of being able to pick and choose the specific tools each system offered in order to tune my home game to be the best that it could be for my table. To dismiss 1D&D, which, to come back to Kyle Brink, is supposedly going to be released into Creative Commons, well, one could say that would toss out the baby with the bathwater. To conclude, when it comes to game design, I like using the Simon Sinek Golden Circles method. I like understanding first the why, a specific purpose, cause, or belief. And then I'm really interested in seeing the how, and last but not least is the what. Based on what it seems Kobold Press wants, they want more what? They want more subclasses, feats, and spells that are PHB only to be released into Creative Commons, whereas OGL 1.0A and SRD 5.1 were a specific how to allow content creators to make their own content alongside the offerings that Wizards of the Coast, as just another creator in this field, was offering, with the information that I currently have and the way I understand it. In terms of Project Black Flag and its future, honestly, I'm disinterested in their whats. The different heritages and the lineages I don't find particularly compelling. Honestly, I can't really get on board with their why either. I think that they do have some pretty compelling hows, some processes, such as the lineage heritage system. Even if I don't like what the kits are, I can respect the how that they presented. But for a company, or at least a representative of the company, to criticize one D&D's direction and approach, and then just copy and clone the same system, like talents being offered as part of your background, it just comes off as hypocritical. So to reiterate, am I going to continue covering and following Project Black Flag? Yes. To dismiss it at this stage would be tossing out the baby with the bathwater. Am I excited about its future? If they maintain this vision and course, to be honest, no. When it came to actually playtesting Project Black Flag, it felt like a have to, not a get to. Now let's look at the other side of the street. Before the release of Unearthed Arcana 4, Druid and Paladin, Wizards of the Coast released a set of videos explaining their vision for the design, why they made certain decisions and nerfed the classes in certain ways. I was honestly really surprised by how excited I was to see what the new Druid and Paladin had to offer. Although we can argue about some of the what's in that document. Is the template we got for Wild Shape satisfactory? Or Divine Smite being nerfed, is that a healthy game balance choice? I can respect the design more because they led with why and what's can be adjusted. I know Kobold Press has a lot of high expectations to rise to, but again, Design Diary 1 extinguished my flame rather than stoke it. So now I want to know, what are your thoughts about the system? Am I being too critical? Are you carrying a torch to help burn me at the stake? Let me know in the comments down below, and have an awesome day, everybody. Bye-bye now.